They saw a woman, tired and unassuming, pushing a shopping cart through the commissary with her young son at her side. They saw her as an obstacle, a civilian, a nobody. They chose to make her their target, mistaking her quiet patience for weakness and her calm demeanor for fear. They pushed and they taunted, escalating their aggression until they crossed a line from which there was no return. In that moment, the illusion shattered, and they discovered that the quiet mother they were tormenting was not just a protector, but a predator, a warrior forged in the most demanding crucible on earth. They learned, in a few terrifying seconds of blindingly efficient violence, that they had just attacked a retired Navy SEAL in front of her son. Now, before we show you just how badly they miscalculated, we need you to join our community of story lovers. If you enjoy tales of underestimated heroes and deserved comeuppance, take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a moment of justice. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Because what they started, she finished. The air in the base commissary was thick and stale, a recycled mixture of floor wax, chilled produce, and the faint, sweet scent of the bakery at the far end of the store. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a flat, unforgiving glare on the polished linoleum floors. It was a Tuesday afternoon in July, and the heat outside pressed against the glass doors like a physical weight, the air shimmering in waves over the vast expanse of the parking lot. Inside, the chill of the air conditioning was a welcome but artificial relief. Evelyn Reed pushed her cart down aisle 7, a squeak from the left front wheel marking a steady, rhythmic complaint with every rotation. Her son, Leo, trailed a few feet behind, his 10-year-old focus entirely captured by the colorful cereal boxes that towered over him. He was a good kid, quiet and observant like his mother. Evelyn, or Evie as she had once been known, looked like any other military spouse running errands in the middle of a tedious week. Her faded jeans were comfortable, her plain gray t-shirt worn soft from countless washes. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a simple, functional ponytail, a few stray strands clinging to her temples in the humid air. There were fine lines around her eyes, the kind etched by sun and sleepless nights, and a certain stillness in her posture that could be mistaken for weariness. She looked tired. She looked average. But the appearance was a carefully maintained illusion, a form of camouflage she had perfected over decades. While her expression was placid, her eyes were not. They moved constantly, a subconscious habit she could no more stop than she could stop breathing. They scanned the aisles ahead, noted the stock boy on a ladder, the spill near the dairy case, the two exits at the front of the store. They registered the reflections in the curved security mirrors, tracking the flow of people without a single conscious thought. Her posture, even as she leaned lightly on the cart's handle, was perfectly aligned. Her weight was balanced, her feet set just so. Her movements were economical, each one purposeful. When she reached for a can of black beans, her hand moved in a single, fluid arc from the cart to the shelf and back again. There was no wasted energy, no hesitation. It was a body honed by a lifetime of discipline to a state of supreme efficiency. Leo, distracted by a box with a cartoon tiger on it, misjudged his path. His small body collided with a shopping cart parked haphazardly in the middle of the aisle. The cart, laden with protein powder, energy drinks, and jumbo bags of chips, wobbled but didn't tip. "Hey! Watch it, kid!" The voice was loud, arrogant, and designed to draw attention. 3 young men stood by the cart. They were all Marines, their haircuts high and tight, their bodies lean and corded with the easy muscle of youth. They wore matching PT shorts and olive-drab shirts, fresh from a workout at the base gym. The one who had spoken, the clear leader, had corporal's chevrons tattooed on his bicep. He puffed out his chest, enjoying the sudden stage. Leo froze, his eyes wide. "Sorry," he mumbled, shrinking back toward his mother. Evie stepped forward, placing herself slightly in front of her son. Her cart acted as a soft barrier between them. She looked at the corporal, her expression unreadable. "He's sorry," she said. Her voice was calm, low, and even. "We're just trying to get our shopping done." She had given him an out. A simple, face-saving path to de-escalation. He could have grunted an acceptance, made a joke, and moved on. The entire interaction could have dissolved in seconds. The corporal, whose name tag read Davis, saw something else entirely. He saw a soft-spoken woman, a tired-looking mom. He saw a civilian, a dependa, in the parlance of resentful junior enlisted. He saw a target. Her lack of a panicked or angry reaction was, in his mind, weakness. Submission. He smirked, a cruel twist of his lips. Sorry, doesn't cut it. You people need to learn to control your brats. This is a military installation, not a playground. His two companions, Miller and Santos, snickered on cue. They shifted their weight, flanking him, creating a human wall that blocked the aisle. Other shoppers began to notice, some slowing their carts, others pretending not to see. The ambient noise of the commissary seemed to dip. Evie did not react. She simply watched him, her head tilted slightly. Her gaze remained steady. We don't want any trouble, she stated. It was not a plea. It was a simple declaration of fact. This only emboldened Corporal Davis. He was performing now, playing to his friends and the silent audience. He took a step forward, closing the distance, deliberately invading her personal space. The smell of sweat and cheap cologne wafted from him. Trouble? Lady, you wouldn't know trouble if it bit you, he sneered, his voice dropping into a mocking, conspiratorial tone. You think because your husband wears a uniform, you get a free pass? You get to just wander around, letting your kid run wild? He was projecting, layering his own insecurities and frustrations onto her anonymous form. She was a convenient symbol for everything he felt slighted by. Evie's posture did not change. Her breathing remained slow and even. She could feel Leo's small hand clutch the back of her shirt. She gave no indication she felt it, but her awareness of him was total. He was the only thing in the universe that mattered. Please, just let us pass, she said. The words were quiet, but they held a finality that should have been a warning. Not loud, not angry, just final. Davis heard only what he wanted to hear. He heard a plea. He saw a woman backing down. He had won. But winning wasn't enough, he needed to humiliate her. He needed to leave a mark. He laughed, a short, ugly bark. Or what? You gonna call your husband? Gonna tell him some mean old Marine was mean to you? He took another step. He was now well within her defensive perimeter, a foolish, fatal error for which he had no frame of reference. He raised his hand. Time seemed to stretch, to thin out. Evie saw the movement begin. She saw the muscles in his shoulder contract, the slight shift of his weight onto his back foot. She saw the arrogant gleam in his eyes, the self-satisfied curl of his lip. And then he crossed the line. He didn't hit her. He shoved her. His palm connected with her shoulder, a jarring, disrespectful push designed to knock her off balance. It was an act of casual contempt. She stumbled back a single step, absorbing the force with a grace he couldn't possibly comprehend. That was his first mistake. His second was turning his attention to her son. Maybe you need to learn some respect, Davis snarled, reaching out and placing his hand on Leo's shoulder, his fingers digging in. Before someone has to teach you a lesson. That was the end. It was not a conscious decision. It was a circuit closing. A switch flipping in the deepest, most primal part of her brain, a place that had been trained, honed, and programmed for years to respond to a specific set of stimuli. A threat to the mission. A threat to an asset. A threat to her child. The shift was imperceptible to the untrained eye, but it was total. The tired softness in her face evaporated, replaced by a chilling, absolute focus. Her eyes, which had been passively observant, narrowed into points of cold, analytical light. Her center of gravity dropped by a fraction of an inch as she settled into a balanced, rooted stance. The muscles in her neck and along her jawline went rigid, cording like steel wire. Her breathing, already controlled, became something else entirely, a slow, rhythmic intake and exhalation, the kind used to steady a rifle scope before a long-distance shot. The mom was gone. The operator was present. Everything happened in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Her left hand moved first. It was not a slap or a grab. It was a precise placement. It covered his hand on Leo's shoulder, her fingers finding the exact pressure points, the delicate web of nerves and bones. Corporal Davis's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then a flash of shock as a surge of incandescent pain shot up his arm. Her grip was not about strength, it was about anatomy. It was a vice made of iron and surgical knowledge. Simultaneously, her right hand shot out, not to his face, but to his wrist. She hooked her fingers around the bone, her thumb pressing into the joint. With a small, efficient twist, a movement no larger than turning a doorknob, she hyperextended the joint. Davis let out a strangled gasp. His knees buckled as his brain screamed at him to relieve the impossible pressure. He was forced downward, not by her strength, but by his own body's desperate attempt to escape the pain. He landed hard on the linoleum, his pride shattering along with his composure. PFC Miller, reacting on pure instinct, lurched forward. He threw a clumsy, haymaker punch aimed at her head. Evie had already released Davis. She didn't dodge the punch so much as flow around it. She took a single, lateral step, letting his momentum carry him past her. As his arm swung through empty air, she placed her hand on the back of his elbow, guiding his trajectory. She wasn't pushing him, she was merely assisting his own forward momentum. Miller crashed headlong into a large metal shelf stacked high with canned chili. The impact was spectacular. Cans rained down around him with a deafening clatter, a few striking his back and head. He collapsed into the heap of dented metal and spilled sauce, dazed and groaning. PFC Santos, the third Marine, had taken a half step forward. He froze. He saw his fire team leader on his knees, cradling a wrist that was not broken but was screaming in agony. He saw his other buddy half buried in a mountain of chili cans. And he saw the woman. She had turned to face him. Her hands were empty, held loosely at her sides. Her expression was utterly blank. It was the absence of emotion that was so terrifying. There was no anger, no fear, no triumph. There was only a calm, lethal stillness. She took one deliberate step in his direction. That was enough. Santos's training screamed at him, but not the training from boot camp. A deeper, more ancient instinct took over. He was prey. He stumbled backward, his hands coming up in a universal gesture of surrender. No, I'm good. We're good, he stammered, his bravado evaporating like mist. The entire sequence, from the shove to Santos's surrender, had taken less than 4 seconds. And then, there was silence. A profound, ringing silence fell over the entire commissary. The squeaking cart wheels had stopped. The casual chatter had died. The only sounds were the hum of the refrigeration units, the pained groans of Corporal Davis, and the metallic rattle of a single chili can as it settled on the floor. Every shopper, every employee who had witnessed the event was frozen in place. They stared, their minds struggling to process the sheer speed and efficiency of what they had just seen. One moment, a loudmouth Marine was bullying a quiet mom. The next, he and his friend were neutralized, and the third was backing away in terror. It didn't compute. There had been no screaming, no wild flailing. Just a series of short, brutal, and almost silent movements. It was like watching a surgeon at work. A very violent surgeon. Evie's posture immediately softened. The operator receded, and the mother returned. She turned her back on the neutralized threats, a sign of ultimate confidence in her work, and knelt beside her son. She pulled him into a hug, her hand stroking the back of his head. "Are you okay, Leo?" she murmured, her voice soft and steady. Are you okay? He nodded against her shoulder, his body trembling slightly. He was scared, but he was unharmed. That was all that mattered. From a few feet away, a new voice cut through the stunned quiet. That wasn't a brawl. An older man stepped forward. He was tall and lean, with a weathered face and the unmistakable bearing of a career military man. He wore a simple polo shirt and slacks, but his ramrod posture and the faded globe and anchor tattoo on his forearm told his story. He was speaking to his wife, but his voice carried in the silence. That, he said, his eyes fixed on Evie with a look of dawning comprehension and awe, was a textbook demonstration of Marine Corps martial arts, level 4. The wrist lock, the redirection, but faster. Cleaner, he shook his head slowly. No. It was more than that. That was something else entirely. The store manager, a flustered man in his 50s, finally arrived, his tie askew. What in the world happened here? I'm calling the MPs. Evie stood up, holding Leo's hand. She looked at the manager, then at the mess of cans and the two groaning Marines. That would probably be for the best, she said, her voice betraying no emotion whatsoever. 2 military police vehicles arrived within minutes, their lights flashing silently in the bright afternoon sun. 4 MPs entered the commissary, their expressions grim and professional. They were met with a bizarre tableau, 2 young Marines being tended to by the store manager, a third standing pale-faced against a row of freezers, and a woman with her young son standing quietly by her shopping cart as if waiting in a checkout line. The senior MP, a sergeant with a thick mustache and tired eyes, took in the scene. His experience immediately led him to a predictable conclusion, a domestic dispute, or perhaps a civilian who had foolishly picked a fight with off-duty Marines. "All right, what's going on here?" he demanded, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet store. Before anyone else could speak, the old man in the polo shirt stepped forward again. "Sergeant, I saw the whole thing. Master Gunnery Sergeant Thomas, retired." The MP sergeant's demeanor shifted instantly. A Master Gunnery Sergeant, even a retired one, commanded respect. "Master Guns. What did you see?" "I saw these 3 corporals harassing this woman and her son," Thomas stated, his voice clear and authoritative. "They instigated, they escalated, and one of them, that one there," he pointed a rigid finger at Davis, "put his hands on her and then her child. She defended herself." The MP sergeant looked from the retired Master Guns to the diminutive woman, then back to the 2 incapacitated Marines. "She did this?" he asked, a note of disbelief in his voice. "Affirmative," Thomas said. "And she did it without throwing a single punch. It was a defensive action. A correction. And frankly, Sergeant, it was the most professional takedown I've ever seen outside of a training film." A chorus of other voices chimed in. The cashier from the next aisle. A young airman's wife who had been buying diapers. An elderly man who had been comparing prices on coffee. The story was the same from all of them. The Marines were the aggressors. They were loud, arrogant, and physical. The woman was calm, quiet, and had repeatedly tried to walk away. She only acted when the corporal touched her child. The testimony was unanimous and unwavering. The situation was now far more complicated than the MP sergeant had assumed. An MP captain arrived, summoned due to the involvement of multiple personnel and a civilian. Captain Hayes was young but carried himself with an air of no-nonsense authority. He listened to the sergeant's summary, his gaze sweeping over the scene. "I need to see everyone's identification," Hayes commanded. The Marines sullenly produced their military IDs. The witnesses offered theirs. Finally, Captain Hayes turned to Evie. "Ma'am, your ID, please." Evie reached into her purse and pulled out a simple wallet. She removed her identification card and handed it to him. It was a Department of Defense ID card, the kind issued to retired military personnel. Captain Hayes took the card and scanned its barcode with the device on his wrist. He looked down at the screen, his brow furrowed in concentration. He read the information. Then he read it again. The color drained from his face. He looked up from his screen, his eyes wide. He stared at Evie, but he was no longer seeing a tired, average mother. He was seeing the text on his screen, a series of codes and designations that made his blood run cold. His posture straightened until it was ramrod straight. He took a half step back, an unconscious gesture of deference. "Ma'am," he said, and the tone of his voice had changed completely. It was now filled with a profound, almost fearful respect. "My apologies. I didn't realize," he cleared his throat. Chief Warrant Officer 5 Evelyn Reed, retired. Naval Special Warfare Development Group. A hush fell over the small group. Most of the civilians didn't understand the designation. But every single military person present, the MPs, the witnesses in uniform, and especially the 3 disgraced corporals, understood perfectly. Naval Special Warfare Development Group. DevGRU. The public knew it by another name, SEAL Team 6. It was a unit that existed in the realm of myth and legend. They were the elite of the elite, the operators sent to the darkest corners of the world to do the impossible. A Chief Warrant Officer 5, a CWO5, was a senior technical expert, a master of their craft. A CWO5 from DevGRU was not just a soldier, she was a living weapon, a strategic asset. The retired Master Gunnery Sergeant just nodded slowly to himself, a small, grim smile touching his lips. It all made sense now. The economy of motion, the surgical precision, the absolute control. It wasn't Marine Corps martial arts. It was something far beyond it. Captain Hayes turned his gaze upon the 3 young Marines, and his face was a mask of cold fury. The professional calm was gone, replaced by a deep, institutional anger. He saw them not just as bullies, but as fools who had, through sheer arrogance and stupidity, assaulted a national treasure. "You 3, he began, his voice dangerously low, "have just made the single greatest mistake of your entire lives. You are a disgrace to your uniform, to the Marine Corps, and to this entire base," he gestured to his sergeant. "Take them into custody. Confine them to the brig. I want a full report on my desk in 1 hour. Their careers are over. They'll be lucky if they're not facing a court-martial and a dishonorable discharge." The MPs moved in, cuffing a stunned and terrified Davis and Miller. Santos, who had not physically touched anyone, was still placed under escort, his face ashen. Captain Hayes turned back to Evie, his expression softening back to one of deep respect. "Ma'am. Chief. Do you wish to press charges? We will support you fully. Assault, child endangerment, we can throw the book at them." Evie looked at the 3 young men being led away, their bravado utterly crushed, replaced by the stark, humiliating reality of their situation. They were just boys, filled with more testosterone than sense, who had picked the wrong person on the wrong day. She shook her head. "No, Captain. That won't be necessary." Hayes looked surprised. "Ma'am. They've been corrected," she said simply. "The lesson has been administered. The consequences from their command will be sufficient." It was not an act of forgiveness. It was a clinical assessment. The problem had been identified, addressed, and neutralized. Further action was inefficient. He understood. He nodded stiffly. "As you wish, Chief." The store manager, who had overheard everything, rushed forward. "Ma'am, please, your groceries, everything is on the house. Please, it's the least we can do." Evie offered a small, polite smile. "Thank you, but that's not necessary," she looked down at her son. "But we would take a bottle of water, if you don't mind." She abandoned her half-full shopping cart, taking only Leo's hand. Together, they walked through the now silent aisles, past the gawking onlookers, and toward the front doors. The MPs and other witnesses parted for them like the sea before Moses. Outside, the suffocating heat of the afternoon felt like a blanket. The world was loud again, the distant roar of a jet, the hum of traffic, the chirping of insects in the parched grass. They walked to their modest sedan, the silence between them comfortable. Once they were buckled in, the air conditioning blasting, Leo finally spoke. His voice was small. "Mom, what was that? Who are you?" Evie started the car, her movements as precise and deliberate as ever. She put the car in drive and pulled slowly out of the parking space. She didn't answer right away, letting the question hang in the cool air of the car. "I'm your mother," she said finally, her eyes on the road. "That's the only thing that matters." She paused, then added, "What you saw back there, that was a tool. A tool for a job I don't have anymore. Sometimes, you have to take the tools out to remind people why they exist." She glanced at him, her expression softening. "And it was a reminder, sweetie. A reminder that true strength isn't about being the loudest or the toughest. It's about control. The loudest person in the room is almost always the weakest." As she drove toward the base exit, she passed the front of the commissary. Master Gunnery Sergeant Thomas was standing on the sidewalk, watching them leave. Their eyes met through the windshield. He didn't salute. She was retired, a civilian. A salute would have been improper. Instead, he brought his hand up to his brow in a gesture of acknowledgement, then gave a single, slow, deliberate nod. It was a gesture that transcended rank and service branches. It was a silent message from one warrior to another. It said, "I see you. I understand. I respect you." Evie returned the gesture with the slightest inclination of her head, a flicker of a smile touching her lips for the first time that day. The respect of her peers, the quiet understanding of those who had walked a similar path, was the only validation she had ever needed. She turned her focus back to the road ahead, her son safe beside her, leaving the chaos and the correction behind. Her job was done.